Story time about how I lost my virginity to my sister's boyfriend. Disclaimers is not my story time. Listed on my Instagram. Please give me a chance before you judge me. I'm 23 years old and I've never been kissed. Don't get me wrong, I have been chased by boys pretty much my whole entire life since I was a kid. But my sister and I have really strict parents. My sister is older than me, she's 25. But for some reason, my dad is way more strict with me. My sister and I are beautiful girls. My dad's always told me that I'm too pretty for my own good. When I was a teenager, I really didn't understand that. But judging by the amount of guys that are always trying to hook up with me, I understand him. My mom is a little bit more lenient. She would allow my sister and I to go out on the weekends without my dad knowing. Honestly, this has caused me to be afraid of guys. Anytime a guy approaches me, no matter how cute he is, I become painfully shy. And I'm actually scared of them. I assume that they're only going to try to take advantage of me because that's all I've ever heard from my dad. Well, the plan backfired on my father because as soon as I became comfortable with a man, I lost my V card to him. And unfortunately, it was my sister's boyfriend. My sister met this guy 6 months ago. He came over to our house and begged my father to let him date my sister. And he's really hot. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I lost my virginity to my sister's boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on me on Instagram. That's when my sister's boyfriend begged my father to let him date my sister. Because my dad is so strict, he actually took this guy to the police station and asked the police officers if he had a record. Luckily, he was totally clean. It took a couple of weeks for my dad to accept this guy. Eventually, when my father approved of him, he started coming over to our house and obviously I was interacting a lot with him. My sister was really excited to have a boyfriend and I was really excited for her to have a boyfriend. Now it was my turn. I asked my dad if I could start dating and he said absolutely not. Mind you, I'm 23 years old and I've never even been kissed. This is where I start feeling like shit. Because my sister loves me, she started inviting me to some of her dates with her boyfriend. And I would tag along because I was bored at home. And slowly but surely, I started having a crush on her boyfriend. He was the kind of guy that I would want to date. He was extremely handsome, already had a full thriving career, went to a great school, had a great sense of humor, and was just fun to be around. I started having dreams about him, and I started thinking about him all the time. And every time he would come over to our house, I got butterflies. I was falling for him. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I lost my virginity to my sister's boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on me on Instagram. That's when I started having dreams about my sister's boyfriend. And not just any dreams, like, you know what I mean. I was having night sweats. It got to the point that anytime he would give me a hug to say hello, I would just hold on really tight. This is when he started noticing that I was getting feelings for him. Anytime he would look my way, I was already looking at him. And then slowly, he started looking at me. And here's the plot twist. My sister met another guy. She came home from a party one night and told me that she made out with some random guy. Apparently, this guy was like the man of her dreams. So she just decided to start cheating on her boyfriend. So I knew it was time for me to swoop in. I went over to his place and told him that my sister was cheating on him. I know, I'm terrible, right? That's when we started kissing and we did it. And it was magical. It was everything I ever expected. I mean, it hurt, but it was good. We actually ended up doing it all night. The next day, my sister tells me she regrets cheating on him and that she wants to be with him. Neither him or I have the heart to tell my sister what we did. So confused. I do want him, but of course my sister's feelings come first. I'm stuck here. What should I do? I told my mom her boyfriend kept trying to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimers is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. Once I was born, my father abandoned my mom and I. So my mom raised me on her own with the help of my grandma. My grandma decided to retire in a different state, so we didn't have her help anymore. This is when my mom started dating a new guy. He was really great. He was definitely a father figure. He took care of me and my mom, and he even had his own son, so we were about the same age. We were like the Brady Bunch. It was the happiest time in my life that I can remember. But soon my stepdad found out that my mother was cheating on him with a neighbor. He would go off to work and my brother and I would go to school. So my mom would have the neighbor come over and they would do whatever they would do. Another one of our neighbors decided to tell my stepdad the truth and he caught them. Quickly divorced my mom and abandoned me too. Because of this, my mom and I definitely have abandonment issues. But it was all my mother's fault from the beginning. She eventually met someone new when I was 16 years old. This man was not like my stepdad. He drank a lot and always invited his friends over. There were always strange grown men in my house. And my mom would constantly tell me to put on clothes before they saw me. But my mom just encouraged them to drink alcohol. Part 2 is up. I told my mom her boyfriend tried to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimers is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. At this point, I was 16 and I was growing into my body. I was a teenager going through puberty. My mom's boyfriend would always invite his guy friends over. And anytime I came out of my room, they would make comments about my body and how quickly I was growing. Then my mom would tell me, you need to cover up before they see you. Instead of my mom protecting me and telling these men not to talk to me like that, she was telling me to cover up. So I did. Around my stepdad and his friends, I started wearing really big t-shirts. This led me to become ashamed of the curves that I was growing into. I would even layer sports bras just to flatten my chest. That's around the time my mom's boyfriend started acting strange. Anytime I was in the bathroom, he would always make up excuses as to why he had to come in. And this man would pee in front of me. Even if I was brushing my teeth or taking a shower, he would always try to come in. I obviously started locking my door and I told my mom that I didn't want him to come in when I was in the bathroom. And she would say things like, this is his house. But he didn't pay rent. My mom was the one paying the rent. Oh yeah, and anytime I had my period, he always wanted to know certain details, like how much I bled. But it gets worse. Part 3 is up. I told my mom her boyfriend tried to molest me and she won't believe me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's me on Instagram. Whenever he would start asking me questions about my period, I would automatically shut off. This was around the time where I got my first boyfriend. This is when I made the mistake of telling my mom the truth. She wanted me to invite my new boyfriend over and all she did was strut around in a tube top and shorts. And she kept saying things to him like, wow, you look so big for your age. She completely embarrassed me and my boyfriend actually felt so uncomfortable he went home. After that, my stepdad kept paying more and more attention to me. Anytime I was in my bedroom, he would always look for excuses to come in. Would knock on my door, and he'd pretend like he wouldn't hear me say don't come in. And he would come in anyway whenever I was changing. Didn't have a lock on my door, so my boyfriend helped me install it. And when my mom's boyfriend found out, he threatened to beat up my boyfriend. One night he came into my bedroom and tried to touch me. I yelled at the top of my lungs and my mom came in. This woman pretended like nothing had happened. The next day she told me that I was just dreaming. Then she told me that I was just trying to provoke him. I actually ended up moving in with my boyfriend and we got married. Bye, toxic mom. I'm about to cheat on my husband with his dad. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. My husband is a little bit abusive, let me explain. We met 3 years ago when I was in college. Since then, he's always been really jealous and controls everything I do. After we got married, he basically told me that he didn't want me to work, so I haven't had a job for a year now. This means he wants me to be home all the time. I've managed to start doing certain things like take Pilates classes, I got into his salsa class, and I've managed to make a couple of friends near us. Now, the other bad thing is that we moved away when we got married. So I'm about 7 hours driving from my family. Because of this, I've become very close to my father-in-law. My mother and father-in-law divorced about 2 years ago. I don't get along with her because she thinks that my husband is perfect and every time I complain about him, she just gets mad. But his dad understands me. He notices how jealous and controlling my husband is, so he tells him all the time he needs to give me time and space. Well, I started falling for my father-in-law. Let me just say something. This man is so handsome. He's so successful and has it together. My husband is really handsome, but the way he controls me just turns me off to the point where I don't let him touch me. And this just makes him angrier. Part 2 is up. I'm about to cheat on my husband with his dad. Because my husband is so controlling and jealous, I became closer to my father-in-law. It's gotten to the point where I don't even let my husband touch me anymore. Anytime he comes near me, he gets so aggressive and always tries to kiss me even if I don't want him to. And every time I go to a dance class or to Pilates, he starts calling me to make sure that I'm there, even though he has my location turned on so he knows where I am at all times. Because my husband has my location all the time, he never gets suspicious when I'm at his dad's house. So my father-in-law and I have been spending a lot of time together. When my husband goes off to work, I invite him over and we start talking about his son. And I basically complain to him the whole time about how controlling and jealous he is. But every time he comes over, the sexual tension between us is so real. My father-in-law invited me to go to the gym with him, so I've been working out with him every single day. And that's made us even closer. A few nights ago, I invited him over again. And that's when I told him the truth that I was attracted to him. That's when he told me that even though we were both attracted to each other, we needed to control our feelings. But I kissed him. Part 3 is up. That's when I started making out with my father-in-law. At that point, I couldn't control myself. We had spent so much time together and bonded over his abusive son, my husband. After I kissed him, we just stared at each other. Mind you, we've only really known each other for about a year. And the whole time I've been with his son, I've always complained to him about how jealous and controlling he is. And how unsatisfied I am because I never let his son touch me. That's when he comes over and kisses me. Something almost happened when we laid down on the couch and started making out, but he stopped himself. I could see in his face how disappointed he was, but he also knows how unhappy I am to be married to his son. That's when I told him that I would get divorced from his son. Then he confessed that his son has been cheating on me for 3 weeks with one of his employees. Apparently, my husband promised him that he would leave her, but hasn't. So I proposed he and I start an affair, while my husband has his affair with his employee. I finally managed to convince him and he said yes. So we're gonna meet at a hotel this weekend. My husband said he's going on a work trip, but he told his dad that he's actually gonna be with his mistress. So I might as well, why not? Life is too short. I'm totally attracted to him, and we'll just keep it a secret. What do you guys think I should do? Every time about how I've never farted in front of my boyfriend and can't even poop if he's in my house, which led me to pooping in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, is not my story time, was sent me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. We are so in love and we met through a dating app. He even moved into my apartment. I know some might say it's quick, but it's just meant to be. We are so in love. We get along super well. We're so attracted to each other. Our sexy time is like amazing, like the best I have ever had. And I was the one that asked him to move in with me and he said yes right away. I actually thought he was going to say no, but he was so down for it that I was so happy. Before he moved in, he actually would come over to my house all the time. And he started farting in front of me. It was cute, funny, whatever. But I can't bring myself to doing it in front of him. I can't even poo when he's in my apartment, much less could I poo when I was at his. So I found myself having to hold it in all day long. Anytime we would go to a restaurant, I would try to go, but sometimes I just couldn't go because I knew that he was there. It's all become very complicated. Now that he moved into my place, we love watching movies. So we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and suddenly I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. There was no way I was gonna go poop while he was there. Out of nowhere, I jump up and tell him that I have to go out. I get in my car, part 2 is up. Story time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend or even poop when he's in the same place as me, which caused me to poo in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Out of nowhere, I jump off the couch and tell him I have to go to the supermarket. He offers to go for me and I said no, but in hindsight, I should have said yeah, sure, you go, so that I could stay alone in the apartment by myself and go poo. I grab my keys and jump in the car, and then suddenly, I start pooping. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it was happening right then and there. I stopped the car and pulled over and just pooped in my car. Luckily, I was wearing baggy pants, so you couldn't really notice it. Suddenly, I remembered I had an extra change of clothes in my car. I looked behind me and there it was, a pair of jeans. I take off my sweatpants and try to wipe myself as best as I could. And I actually went to a CVS, went into the bathroom, cleaned myself. I even bought baby wipes. Oh my god. I changed into the jeans and I got back in the car and went home. When I get home, my boyfriend says, "Did you just change?" Then I told him I ripped my pants somehow in the grocery store. And then he said, "You didn't bring anything back from the grocery store." And I didn't know what to say. Part 3 is up. Time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend and this caused me to poop in my car by mistake. Disclaimers are not my story time, I was on me on Instagram. I told him that I had ripped my pants, so I changed into other pants. And then he asked, "But you didn't bring anything back from the supermarket." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right." Then I told him that I went to CVS instead because I needed baby wipes, which I actually did buy them, so I showed them to him. But let's remember I had just pooped on myself, so I really wanted to take a shower. So I tell him, "Hey babe, I'm actually gonna take a shower because I just got my period." Then he says, "But you just had your period last week." I just kept digging a bigger and bigger grave. Then he sits me down and says, "What's going on?" I just couldn't lie anymore. And I told him the truth, that I had pooped in the car because I didn't want to poop in the apartment because he was there. That's when he started laughing maniacally and told me that I was being so stupid. To this day, I still can't fart in front of my boyfriend. And I still can't go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how to fix this or how to even go about actually doing it for the first time. So maybe you guys have some ideas. Also, never going back to that CVS because I'm pretty sure I didn't put the pants in the trash and they were just lying on the floor and they saw me go in. What should I do? Story time about how a strange man abused me because I did not want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time, I sent him on Instagram. That's when he slid his hand onto my lap. I quickly get up from the table and ask him to leave. That's when he said, "Why are you freaking out? I'm just trying to get your number." Then I told him that there was absolutely zero chance I would ever give him my phone number. And he said, "Oh, you think you have a choice?" And he holds out his phone so that I could type in my number. I pushed his phone back and again asked him to leave. He threatened me and said that he wouldn't leave until I gave him my number. My knees and hands were shaking. Look back at my employees behind the counter and they are scared. That's when one of my employees says, "I'm gonna call the cops." And I said, "Yes, call them." As soon as I turned back to this man, he swings at me. He wasn't able to reach my face, but then he grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me down onto the ground. This all happened in about 30 seconds. As I'm on the ground, he starts slapping me. I covered my face with my arms and I just started kicking at him. And my two female employees, who by the way are like 17 and 18, start attacking the guy. And then he starts hitting them. Thankfully, two men from the street hear me yelling. I came in and tackled him and the police arrived 2 minutes later. I found out this guy was stalking me for a month. I got a restraining order. Be careful out there. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I'm sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, "Ew." He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, "Oh, you know how he is." So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates, and one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting. And that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.